Okay, hello everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Lea Rachel Kosnik from the University of Missouri at St. Louis. Thank you, Lea, so much for doing this and taking time out of your busy schedule to talk a little bit about your work and your life. And that's my first question for you: is that can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a fun or surprising fact that very few people know?
Well, first, let me say thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. I think this is a great project to get to know more economists, and so thank you for the invitation.
Like, sure.
Yeah, so I will say I am a full professor of economics at University of Missouri, St. Louis. Before that, I actually lived in Montana and I did a postdoc at Montana State University in Bozeman. Before that, I got my PhD in economics at UCLA, and before that, my bachelor's originally at University of Michigan. And so, an interesting fact about me, if you sort of follow that geography, is that I've lived in all four continental time zones of the United States. So I right now in St. Louis live in the central time zone.
Yeah.
Montana, which is the one that most people miss. Most people miss the mountain time zone, but I lived in Montana for over 2 years. Of course, UCLA is on the West Coast. And Michigan, some people don't realize this, they think it's Chicago, but actually Michigan's the eastern, all the way on the east. So I've lived in all four for multiple years at a time, and rarely meet other people that can claim that.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, that's definitely unique. Great, great. So my next question for you is, what sparked your interest in environmental economics? Was it an incident, a person? How did you get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love being able to answer this and put a shout out to a very old mentor of mine. And because it also sort of emphasizes the importance of mentorship and meeting people and talking to people and not being afraid of going to see professors at office hours and talking to them. So I was getting my bachelor's degree in economics at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And I was getting an honors degree, which meant you had to have a thesis. And I was pure economics. I wasn't yet environmental economics. And I was trying to find a thesis, and I happened to be taking a class. It was actually a geography class by Professor John Kolars. That's my shout out to John Kolars. And he was very personable, always willing to talk to his students. And I remember I was going to class, and then he sent an email that he was canceling class for a week because he was going overseas to the Middle East to advise governments in Turkey and Egypt on their water resources. And I was very impressed. And I mentioned how I'd always been curious about the Euphrates and Tigris rivers since I have a bit of a Turkish background. And his response was to say, "Oh, while I'm in Istanbul, I'd be happy to get you some data for your honors thesis." And I remember thinking, oh my God, like, can he really do that? And he did. He, on his own time, on his own, trip, came back with some data for me so that I could do an honors thesis on the hydroelectric power development that was happening along the Euphrates and Tigris rivers in Turkey at the time. And it was so kind and of him to do. And I was already sort of interested in environmental issues and water resource and renewable energy and hydropower, and that just solidified it. I mean, I wrote the thesis, and then from there, actually, my PhD program, I concentrated on hydroelectric power issues, and a number of my initial publications were more about U.S. domestic hydropower that built off that knowledge about hydroelectric power that I gained really from having John Kolars as a mentor who was willing to go above and beyond and get me data for a thesis.
That is an amazing story. It is because when you ask people about how they were inspired, if it's a person, it's sometimes or maybe it's an economist, but in your case, it's he was not. You say he was a geographer. So wow, that's awesome. So can you please tell? Yeah, you've mentioned a little bit about this. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional trajectory? What roles have you had, and the kind of work you've done, and that could be really anything, something that you would share with our audience, as well as the lessons that you've kind of learned along the way. So it's a multi-part question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I'll start by outlining the trajectory a little bit. I mean, I will say that it's primarily a traditional academic trajectory in that, I got my PhD. I mean, I did a postdoc, which is more and more common. 20 years ago, it was not as common, but I did do that, which was maybe a little bit unique. And then I got an academic tenure track job, did the assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, department chair,
Mm-hmm.
did the whole sort of gambit. In the process of that, I've done other sort of more service roles, becoming a senior editor on a journal, currently serving on the board of ARI, the Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. So doing a few unique things here and there, which I've greatly enjoyed. Um, I will say the non-traditional, perhaps, part of my trajectory is some of my research. So I did stick to purely environmental economic topics in a sort of safer manner until I got tenure, which I imagine I would advise people. But I did also have sort of a colleague and a little bit of a mentor at University of Michigan who, after I got tenure, said, you know what, tenure, it's sort of like government giving you and supporting a public good. Like you are a public good to the country and to the world, and as such, you should explore things. Sometimes they'll fail. You might have research that doesn't get published and nobody cares about. But sometimes, you could really write something that's just amazing and really hits the mark. And the beauty of tenure is allowing you to do that and not worry too much.
Yeah.
So I took that to heart. And after tenure, I started co-authoring with political scientists and writing papers about voter fraud. I was working with communications professors and writing papers that had to do with the media. I started exploring like more survey work and valuation techniques. I got into text analysis and natural language processing and some other unique things. And for a while, I was a little bit all over the place, but it was super fun. Super, super fun. I then started gravitating back towards topics that were more traditionally, or at least could be categorized as environmental economics, not just like political science and
Right,
some,
right.
uh, you know. But I will say that I feel like that was a little bit non-traditional. I mean, you see some academics who, and there's nothing wrong with this, but have one area like income inequality, and they just write on that forever. And it looked a little bit like for me that was going to be renewable energy. I was, for 8 years, 10 years, I wrote about renewable energy. But over the last 10 years, I've really written all over the place and really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it.
And, to some extent, that matters a great deal, right? And I feel that, in our profession, we actually happen to have the luxury to be able to do that, to have
Exactly.
fun, to have fun. So I think that's awesome.
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
maybe this is a related question, which is that, what's the one of the most fulfilling aspects of your current professional role?
Well, I mean, I will say the research is very fun, but if we're talking about most fulfilling, and this probably would have been surprising if I'd known 20 years ago this would be my response because I am a traditional academic that's a little bit more of an introvert than an extrovert. I love just reading books and articles and staying at home. But I will say what's been most fulfilling is the colleagues and the students and the people. I've really, really, I do to this day really enjoy my students. I really like where I'm at the University of Missouri because we do place a good amount of weight on teaching. I mean, it's still less than research. I would say it's sort of like 60% on research, 30% teaching, and 10% service. But it's genuine that they care about teaching. And I really do enjoy connecting with students and meeting them in the hallways and talking to them. And similarly, my colleagues. So one of my roles, service roles, has been as organizer of the
Mhm.
environmental sessions at the Midwest meetings every year. And I've been doing that for over 10 years now. And in the beginning, I did it because I had research I wanted to present. There was a few of us putting it together. But over 10 years, it's grown. And we have a full track of sessions now, over 40 papers usually, and over 100 people apply, and many people attend. And people have emailed me about the friendships form, the co-authorships that came out of it, and every year I go and it's the it's joyful. And I had no idea how rewarding helping foster those connections and making them myself would be, to be totally honest with you.
You are genuinely living up the idea of the public good. Right? Yes, and I will say this, I can say this, I can attest to what Leah just said, is that I was at the Midwestern Econ conference and I was kind of shocked slash surprised that everybody knew you. All the people, and you knew them. And I think that's amazing. That's really
It's
amazing. So,
shocking to
yeah.
me too, because again, it's not my natural habitat to be so extroverted. But at those meetings, it's a constant hi and hugs. And
I would never pin you down as an introvert.
people say
So,
that.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Awesome, awesome. You know, can you describe one project you're currently working on that you find particularly interesting? And if you've learned something new or unexpected from that?
Sure. So right now, I'm in the middle of a project with a colleague at Brock University in Canada. Shout out to Diane DuPont. We came across a paper a couple of years ago. Well, I came across a paper a couple of years ago where somebody had estimated the value of a statistical dog's life. So not just a value of a statistical life, but for dogs. And it sounded, even the title of the paper was sort of funny. But there's real application. I mean, not just to Purina and pet food companies, but there are like public funds that go towards initiatives like pets in jails and pets for senior citizens, and there's pet cafes, and there's many applications. There's grants for
That's right.
pet disease, stuff like that. Anyway, I read this and I thought this is great. But what? Nobody had done it for cats. And so you needed money to do the survey, and I love my university, but we're very poor. I had no money. So this let me also say that one lesson of this is the importance of going to conferences. I was sitting next to Diane at a conference and having lunch, and I told her about how I, wanted to do the value of a statistical cat's life, but I had no money. And she was like, "I've got money. Let's do it."
Oh, wow.
We're right now estimating the value of a cat's life. And I can tell you that when I told one of my different colleagues that I was doing this, he said, what you really need to do is a comparison of who is worth more, cats or dogs. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do that because people will kill me and start arguing at conferences. But I can tell you that the way the survey that the survey company we hired, we ask people if they own a cat to take our survey, and if they say no, we have to pay for them anyway. So then we just put them into dogs. So we are getting data on both cats and dogs, and we are able to answer the question, which one is valued more currently in the United States?
This is going to be a very, very cheesy comment, but isn't there a movie called The Truth About Cats and Dogs?
I think there is, because you're not the first person to mention that. I need to watch it. I mean, because I can't remember it right now. I probably have watched it, but I don't remember it. But I should watch it.
I'm just wondering if if that's, you can use that as a title of your paper, The Truth About Cats and Dogs.
That is good. Oh, I should actually write that down.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I will let I will remind you of that. Yeah, in case you forget, I'm like, you know what? Did you submit that paper? This is like a title for you to consider. So, moving on, we all have areas where we need to improve, weaknesses, whatever have you. So, could you share something about like a weakness that
Right.
you feel would be good to address something that you want to improve
Yeah.
upon.
Well, so I mentioned before that I have been department chair in the past. I will say that I am stepping up again, and
Yeah.
as of August 1st, I'm going to be department chair again. And you do that very, much for your department, and I also just enjoy shifting around roles. But I will say that I learned a lot my first time being chair, and the difficulty I have is dealing with administration,
Mm.
successfully dealing with administration, managing personalities, and advocating for the needs of your department, but also keeping in mind the university as a whole. And I will say, like, I am an academic who loves debate and learning and understanding things. And one thing that I learned the first time, I'm going to try to apply better this time, but I need practice at it, is that does not apply to administration. So what I've learned is that I need
Okay.
to be quiet more often and listen more often than engage in debate and say to a dean, are you sure you want to do that? And maybe this. And I mean, I think there's a place for, arguing or, having a conversation. But I think especially with administration, there's a different way to behave that I'm still
Mhm.
learning. I'm not good at. And part of it is being quiet more, listening more, and being very selective when you do use your firepower and advocate. Like, you can't argue over everything your department needs. So you need to really figure out when to do it. And I'm still learning how to do that.
Let me tell you as well as the audience that you are not the first person on these in these interview series to tell me that.
Really?
Yeah, you're not the first one. So I completely understand what you're saying is I have a lot of respect for you and everybody else who does administration because I like to do stuff like this interview series or mentoring or organizing stuff, but administration is different.
Yeah.
And it's hard, like, dealing with people, and that's a different level of hard. And again, there's no training for these things, right? And you have to learn on the job.
I think that's the biggest. I mean, maybe it's different at different universities, but I will say certainly where I'm at, that's a big drawback. There is no training. There's no mentorship, there's no help. So, if you don't have colleagues or a department that really supports you and you're just sort of thrown into the job, it can be very hard. And there should
Hmm.
be more training or something. Yeah, it's really not, because I think at private companies, they more, move people up and, in the ladder and know you're going there and help you out. And at least here, there isn't. There's just, oh, it's your turn. Everybody has to do it. Nobody particularly wants to do it. It's your turn to be department chair, and good luck with that.
Right.
Uh, and I do wish there was a little more help for sure.
Exactly. And given that, you provide a lot of mentorship to lots of people in the profession, so you would know the value of that, so to speak, of mentorship. So, moving on, looking back to your past work and interactions. Well, I guess this is related. If you could redo something, what would that be? Would that be what you just said about doing things differently as a department head? Is there anything else? And I'll tell you why I ask this question, because I feel that in academia, we all, celebrate successes,
Yeah.
and in that sense, for all the early career scholars, regardless of, whether they are in academia or outside of it, they think it's all successful. Everybody is having successes because nobody's talking about things that they would
Right.
have a do-over on. So that's
Right.
probably my biggest motivation for asking these questions to the people chat with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, so I think about that, and it's funny, it just came up like a week ago in a different context with a different friend. So one thing is, I've mentioned how rewarding colleagues are and how important networking is and how important going to conferences is, because you could sit next to somebody at lunch and all of a sudden have a great paper. And I will say at the very beginning of my career, and maybe this is especially important for people who end up at not top line universities, but sort of mid-level universities like University of Missouri that have constrained budgets and can't always afford all the research money and travel money you want. But there were a number of times early in my career when my paper got accepted to
Mhm.
conferences, but then my department did not have the money to send me. And I mentioned this because one of them was the Aries conference in Banff in Canada that people still talk about how amazing it was. My paper got accepted, but then we didn't have money to send me, and so I didn't go. Looking back now, I should have just spent my own money. So, in a lot of professions, if you're a car mechanic, you have to buy your own toolbox and a lot of your own tools. You buy your own paints. Like, if you have to invest in your own career. And as an academic, you invest in getting your degree, of course. But once you have your degree and the university provides your computer and paper and stuff like that, I kind of wish I'd spent the money, even though it's tough, in your early years when you're also starting a family, and gone to all the conferences I got accepted to, rather than when then I didn't have money, I canceled. Because to this day, I sort of regret not going to some of the cities that they were in, meeting some of the people I could have met. I see now how much going to conferences really helps you develop ideas and network and whatnot. So I really do regret not going to those conferences that I could have, but the department couldn't pay for.
That's a great point. If I don't have the money, I don't even apply to go. But you raise a very, very important point because it's always like, we are in the profession of researching on trade-offs. And this is a very big trade-off, especially, yeah, right, for
I
people
mean,
who are
I
not.
mean, it is, and I do understand that conferences aren't cheap. And it's, I'm chair of the graduate student engagement committee right now, so I'm meeting a lot of these graduate students, and some of them are smarter than me. Like they meet other people and they share hotel. They find, if they can only afford $500, they sort of find a way to do it anyway. And like, I love the entrepreneurial spirit to go anyway. And I didn't think of that. I didn't think of some of those things. And again, looking back over my career, like, how did I start organizing the MEA meetings? Well, it was because I went to the MEA meetings once and met somebody who was like, you should do this. And then, and I think of the cat paper that was going to a conference. I mean, so many things in my career that have been very rewarding. The seed happened at a conference. And
Yep.
so, we all make mistakes and have some regrets, but I do sometimes think about, I wonder what seeds I never let grow because I didn't go.
Yes, yes, you're right. You're right. That's a great point for all of us to remember. And I feel the other thing is that even if you don't get like a paper or something more concrete, by
Yeah.
just meeting people, they get to know you and you get to know, like myself as an editor, if I have like sent review requests to people that I met at the MEA meetings. And thankfully they have all agreed. It's so hard to find reviewers, and you get asked to be letter writers and all of that, and ultimately,
Yep.
if you are a good colleague, these things will keep on happening, which are part of your own professional development as well. So that's a great point. That's a great point. So is there like a new activity that you would like to pursue in your future, in your career in the future, something that you haven't done that you want to do?
I mean, I have always thought it would be enjoyable at some point to work temporarily in government, like for the Council of Economic Advisors or something like that. I mean, I think it depends on the administration whether you want to do it now or later. And again, it's not like I've been asked yet, but and I've also been nervous about what if I am asked when my child is still in high school and be hard to
Mhm.
move. In a couple of years, he'll have graduated, and I don't know if it'll happen, but I do think it would be really fun. I know like the EPA sometimes has visiting researchers for a year, but working at the EPA or the Council of Economic Advisors, something like that is something I've not done, but I've heard from colleagues is really rewarding, really interesting. You learn about data sets you didn't even know existed, and then you start to have access to them. You learn how policy gets made, in a very non-idealized way that a lot of economic models assume.
That's true.
I mean, I hear it's very interesting. And so I feel like it'd be difficult because it would mean moving to DC and, even being offered. But that is something I think would be really fun if at some point in my career I have the chance to do.
So in our audience, if somebody's listening, Leah is interested. Let's just keep it at that. So, looking ahead, what do you think are some of the most exciting things in, environmental economics in the next 10 to 15 years? If you
Yeah.
had a crystal ball, is what I've been telling people.
Well, I mean, I will say, I mean, some of this has already begun, but like the sort of data revolution and big data sets and I find and field experiments that can use big data sets, like I love all that stuff. I will say, very recently, like in the last year, I've been reading some of the very new papers written by economists on
Mhm.
AI, and they've mostly come out of the National Bureau of Economic Research. So not even like they're new enough they hadn't even been published yet. But for example, like there's a few papers on, I've told you about the cat paper, and I have a few other papers, one of which you know of, on surveys. But I've been reading there, AI, there's been ways to allow Chat GTP and other, and Claude, some other of these large language models simulate people and simulate survey responses. So you can have AI generate 1,000 survey responses, and you don't have to find a co-author who has money to pay for them. Um,
Mhm.
and I find this fascinating, and that's one aspect. But I've read some AI papers about how it's going to transform the labor market, how AI is going to change jobs and job titles, and what's necessary for employment. So some of this is a little bit outside of environmental economics, but I am truly fascinated by some of the very recent AI research that's coming out, because it's written as if it's going to just really, I mean, I think you said 10 to 15 years. We're talking, less than that. In the next 3 to 5 years, there could be some major changes. And I don't know if that really will happen, but I do find reading the papers just fascinating.
Yes, and it's wow. My knowledge of AI is fairly limited. And I'm what I'm very interested in is kind of seeing what's the interaction between AI and its how it impacts the environment,
Right.
with the water usage and all of that kind of stuff. So
Right.
yep, absolutely. So looking back, what is something that you wish someone had told you when you were starting out as a young professional that you now know?
Yeah. Well, a few of the points I think we've touched on, like
Yeah.
networking and conferences. I mean, I guess I would say one other thing that is very recently and sort of increasingly being driven home for me, and especially with this younger generation of economists. So again, working on the GSE panel for ARI, the Student Involvement Committee, they put together these panels, and they had one recently on mental health. And one advice I would say that, I didn't know before, but maybe seems obvious, but I don't think it is to take care of yourself. And the panel that we had just this last year, and if you join and are a member of ARI, these panels, I mean, it's behind a firewall. You have to join, or a paywall. But once you join, you can still go back and watch these panels. But we had one in the last year about mental health, and we had one colleague who was very open, talked about how he's had breakdowns. And getting his PhD was very difficult for him mentally. And now, he'd like tenure, but his rule is that, he makes sure he works a solid 4 hours a day, but that's all he makes himself do. If he does more, that's great. But if he does at least four, then he's not hard on himself. And it's made a world of difference. His mental health has improved. The point of the panel was just that, there are economists, as there are in all professions, that have committed suicide. Pressures can be very difficult, and we, as a profession, don't talk enough about mental health. And even I, 20 years in, was just mesmerized by the panels and some of the stories they were telling. And I will say that, I am getting a little bit older. I'm starting to hit that midlife crisis and looking back and thinking of things. And I do think, you know, going and getting yourself massages, if you get a paper published, treating yourself to a nice dinner, doing what you need to do to take care of your mental health is not a side thing. Like, it's important, and it should be fundamental to your day and how you think about your life and your career. And that is something nobody, I think, talked about at all 20 years ago, and are even barely talking about now, but it is very important.
Yeah, and I thank you for, kind of talking about that because I feel that we talk about this, but the more we talk about the importance of mental health and what that can do in terms of making ourselves successful professionals, the more it is going to be accepted by people. Because I feel that, I have had students or former students who have said that, I burned out and everything. And at that point of time, if I said, you are supposed to get me your manuscript, that doesn't help. That really doesn't help anyone.
Yeah.
So talking more about that, like really benefits the profession, so to speak. So I'm very glad you said that. So, maybe was this, what guidance do you have for early career researchers? We have talked about, paying attention to mental health, going to conferences, really evaluating the trade-offs of going to events,
Yeah.
meetings. Anything else that, people can
I mean, I
right?
will say, and I mention this sometimes, especially, to everybody, but especially to some of my female students and that I'm mentoring, um, is to speak up, and try to meet people and try to talk to people. I think it's a little sometimes harder for women who are a little more told to be quiet and are afraid of
Hmm.
what they'll look like if they speak up. I mean, the way it was once put to me that I think has been valuable for me is that there's your personal life and your professional life. And in your personal life, you want everybody to like you. So, you want to be nice and maybe give in and not say things sometimes. In your professional life, you want to get things done. You want research that's exciting. And so you sometimes, maybe like should reach out to somebody you've never met before and say, where did you get that data? And can you help me? And you may be nervous, like, I don't know, can I reach out to that person that are at, top university? And is that going to be weird? My answer is just reach out. What's the worst going to happen? They say no. I mean,
Exactly.
and me, and if anything, I don't think they're going to not like you. They're just going to be impressed that you're reading their paper and you're reaching out. And so be a little less worried about people liking you in your professional career. I guess that sounds weird. But speak up, do things. I mean, there's a nicer way to do it and a more annoying way to do it, but don't be afraid of sticking your neck out and having your voice be heard.
Absolutely. And I say the same thing to my students. And I always say one thing is that, if you are not doing it, somebody else might be doing it with the same idea and get ahead of you.
Yeah.
So, and which is, we are all in a line. If there's some people ahead of us, others behind us, but it's not about, overtaking others or, passing others. But the thing is losing the opportunity just because you did not put yourself out there. And if you're not going to put yourself out there when you are an early career academic, it's going to be, I guess it keeps on getting harder, or maybe not. I don't know. I've always put, like I've told you, right, that, I have an issue with not saying no. And
Yeah.
I keep on doing that, like not saying no, because it's never like, not helped me. So that's that. But anyway, our final question for you today is, are you open to being approached by other researchers, wanting to collaborate with or interact with, and what's the best way to do that? And I
Yeah.
think you've made it abundantly clear that that's a resounding yes on that.
Yes, I mean, of course, for sure. And I mean, I don't think I'm the type of person to just about ever not respond. So you will, I mean, I have reached out to other colleagues, and sometimes you do just get no response, which is fine. But reach out no matter what, for sure. It's because actually it genuinely is, and maybe you can have your opinion and speak up on this too. But it's on some level just a compliment for somebody to reach out and be interested in what you're working on and maybe want to work with you. If you know that maybe they don't have time right now, maybe later, but it's a pleasure to talk with people and reach out. So of course, people can feel free to reach out to me. And the best way is probably email. The best way is definitely probably email. I mean, I have a work phone, but I almost always let it go to voicemail, even when it rings and I'm there. Uh,
Yeah. Yes,
so yeah,
exactly. Great. Well, that brings us to the end of another conversation. Thank you so much, Leah, for your time. And I think our audience is going to really enjoy listening to what you have to say. Have a great day. Bye bye.